Hello everyone, this is Cameron Smith and I will be going through the webinar today with you. We'll be talking about corporate meeting and huddle room technology. We'll get rolling in a couple of minutes, about 2 minutes. We'll let some final people log in and then we'll get started. Thanks. Good afternoon again, everyone. This is Cameron Smith, and I'm with TechLogix. Today, we are going to be looking at corporate meeting room and huddle room technology. And I would like to start by thanking the folks at AVPro who put together this webinar and invited me to come and work through a couple of topics with you today. So who am I? I am one of the founders of TechLogix. We're in the manufacturing, design, and development of technology. We specifically focus in two areas. One is fiber optics, and the other is collaboration technology. So the stuff that we're going to be talking about today. And we realize it's a big topic. And our company, TechLogix, tends to focus on the smaller rooms. So what we would define as a huddle room, and that's something we're going to be looking at here as we walk through this webinar. So what will we cover today? We're going to start with talking about some trends. We're going to look at what trends are really driving the industry, driving change, driving some of the end user buying decisions. It's a big part of why we do what we do every day. And then we're going to look at the huddle room specifically. Now, huddle room is a term that a lot of people are throwing out there. And simply put, it's because there's a lot of spending going on in this specific little market opportunity. And we'll look at what that is and kind of how it affects the technology that we're all working with on a day-to-day basis. Then we'll move into the specific technology conversation, looking at how TechLogix tackles some of these opportunities and how that's relevant for you and the industry as a whole. And then we'll wrap up looking at a little bit of crossover technology. You know, anytime we talk about collaboration, that can touch into a lot of different markets. And very often, folks do see a lot of different opportunities, a lot of different markets, and different types of installations as they kind of work through their Rolodex of installations. So let's start the conversation today with looking at the industry overall, and more specifically, the remote work trends and some of the general macro trends that are affecting corporate AV decision making. And this is really on an end user level. There's an interesting thing that's happening right now, and that is more and more folks continue to work from home. This is something that corporate world needs to contend with. And frankly, they're enabling this because they're seeing that as employees are tethered less and less to their desks, their productivity is actually affected in a positive way. Plus, companies are going out and recruiting talent not based on geography, but based on fit for the specific job. And that is increasingly forcing businesses to contend with, how do we collaborate? How do I have multiple different employees that may be located not only across the city, but across the world? How do they collaborate on a day-to-day basis? And this trend continues to increase. And it's increased to the point where businesses and business owners need to sit down and start to design, with AV professionals like ourselves, design the new way to meet, the new way to arrange a meeting room, looking at technology that allows for this collaboration with folks who are remote and increasingly working from remote spaces. Now, the other things that are affecting corporate decision making are simple little issues like technology not doing what technology needs to do. And it's not always technology's fault. Sometimes it's a training issue. The simple fact, and this is a real statistic that comes from a third-party white papers, some handouts that we'll be providing here as we go on. But 88% of meeting attendees are frustrated with technology, and this frustration comes from not being able to do what's expected. You know, and in some cases, this is as simple as, I don't know how to connect to the TV. I don't know how to turn the TV on. Or I lost the remote control for the TV. The remote control batteries are dead. There's a lot of different variables that affect technology's inability to get rolling for a presentation or a meeting. And it touches the vast majority of corporate professionals, thereby driving a huge dissatisfaction in the professional corporate world. And when we start to look at how this actually affects productivity, and this is an important thing for all of us AV professionals, right? As we go out and we're designing systems, we're talking about, you know, upselling and creating sales direction for new technology. When we engage on the level of how many of your meetings run late, we start to see there's a direct correlation between lost productivity and lost income. And this costs the United States alone about $37 billion per year. So we can start to really use technology to target areas of lost spend, lost productivity, lost wages, you know, basically wage income for these different businesses. So the good news is, when we look at all of this, it's a huge opportunity for us to use technology to solve a problem. And the other thing is, this is not us creating a market. This market exists. You know, over the next couple of years, this small meeting space, the huddle room as it's called, and we'll define that in a minute, there's going to be over $100 billion spent just on small meeting spaces here in the United States, and that includes the technology that's going into these rooms. So it's a massive market opportunity, massive amounts of spending, massive area where we can provide value as AV professionals. So let's take a look at what this all means in terms of the real world. So here we have a real building from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, laid out in the way that most office complexes have historically been laid out, traditionally been laid out. So we see things that look pretty common, right? We see some meeting rooms, conference rooms, some employee offices, you've got some workstations where we've got some cubicles where people can sit down and do their work. This is the way buildings have been laid out for decades. Now, this is not what we are seeing in most modern buildings. And again, it has nothing to do with, you know, architectural layouts, changes in norms. It has everything to do with remote collaboration, folks needing to find a way to interact with other employees who are outside the office, or business colleagues, partners who are outside the office. we're seeing folks who are tethered less to their desk. And this is driving this traditional way to lay out a building into a new way to lay out a building. And that's where the huddle room comes in. So what we're seeing are banks of rooms. Banks of rooms, not as in banks, the financial institution, but banks of rooms laid out side by side, one next to each other in these corporate facilities. And typically what you'll see is, as you walk down the hall, you'll see these small meeting rooms all side by side, and the actual business unit owners and business professionals, the way that they use these rooms is they walk down the hall, they find a room that's open, they hop in, they have their meeting, they hop out. And for that reason, since it's kind of on this first come, first served basis, you see multiple rooms stacked next to each other in these corporate facilities. And you're seeing these installations on a massive scale. Companies like Microsoft, 23,000 rooms being deployed worldwide. A lot of rooms. Bank of America, Coca-Cola, IBM. We can go down the list of these enterprise organizations, and not just technology companies, but companies across a variety of markets that are seeing the value in these small meeting spaces for collaboration. So these larger areas, these areas that used to be offices, they used to be big conference rooms and big meeting rooms, are being quadranted, are being broken down into small meeting spaces. That's what's known as a huddle room. Now we can further define this opportunity, define the huddle room with some other commonalities. And again, a lot of research goes into this. This is something that, anytime you have a $100 billion a year market, lots to spend, you're going to have a lot of analytics around this. You're going to have a lot of manufacturers, just like TechLogix, who are focusing on the opportunity, focusing on this type of a space to create solutions and really put a face on it. And what we're seeing from a common theme standpoint is the huddle room. The classic, typical huddle room is a space made for 6 or less users. And those users may be internal, actually 6 people sitting around a table having a meeting, or external, folks who are sitting in the room, meeting with people who are remote, working from home, working across the world, working in a different office. They're external. And you're seeing these spaces are being used for folks who are blended, 6 or less users on average, who are blended, working from various places. And because these are made for ad hoc meetings, again, we're walking down the hallway, we're finding an open room, we're hopping in, we're having our meeting, they're really designed for flexibility depending on what the meeting calls for and whom the meeting calls for at any given moment. Now, these are being used for short little burst activities. These are not offices. People don't park here all day, do their work. On average, people are in them for 45 to 60 minutes. And because they're 45 to 60 minutes, it's really important that we have efficiency of technology launch, meaning I need to get into my meeting, get into the content, get it done fast. In order for us to have a 45 to 60-minute meeting, we can't afford 20% of our meetings starting late. We can't afford dead time. And that's one of the things that's really important with the corporate decision makers is that technology is easy to use, it's replicatable. Each room is the same. There are not differences between these huddle rooms, right? Every room interacts in the same way. And it allows us to simply get into our meeting, do our work, and get out. Now, one of the really important things that we all have to recognize as we look at things like the huddle room is the dollar value on spend. And this is something that's been decreasing over the last 4 or 5 years. We're seeing an average spend package per room of about $5,000 to $10,000. And that includes things like displays, furniture, AV equipment, connectivity. It's an all-in number. So that forces us as AV professionals to look at these spaces and say, okay, I need to be able to hit a budget. This is a low-cost room, relatively speaking. But the good news is I'm not doing one room. I'm doing an entire bank of rooms. I'm doing a bunch of rooms. So it really does add up, but we have to be cognizant of the fact that each room has a specific budget assigned to it, and we've got to create technology that fits that budget. Now, there are things that we can look at from a commonality standpoint that are not found in the room. And these are things like equipment racks. And again, this is not every case, right? These are just the generalities based on research out there looking at thousands of installations that happen over the last 4 to 5 years. Very rarely do you see an equipment rack. Very rarely do you see a dedicated control system, i.e. the touch panel, the traditional third-party touch screen that we're familiar with as AV professionals. And very rarely are you seeing dedicated audio reinforcement. Not that that doesn't happen. Yes, there is audio integration in the rooms, but often it's a sound bar. It's really only the larger rooms that you're seeing dedicated audio reinforcement systems. So when we put all of this together, when we understand what is being looked for in these rooms, and then we understand what typically isn't going in the rooms, it becomes very important that we focus on a couple of different trends. And this is, again, something that we're seeing. Simple device connectivity. Got to be a fast meeting, low downtime, really reduced downtime. You're seeing a lot of automation. And for those of you who are on the technology side of the business, you know that automatic switchers and presentation switchers, auto wall plates, auto sensing wall plates, things like this. These have all been increased in prominence over the last couple of years. You're seeing a lot of technology like this that is being deployed in these professional corporate AV spaces. You're seeing displays, not projectors. Now, is that always the case? Not necessarily, but by far, due to the cost of displays decreasing, you're seeing more and more flat panel displays going in these rooms. And then one of the most interesting statistics to me is you see remote collaboration through portable devices, not necessarily dedicated systems. And what do I mean by that? This was something that got a lot of industry attention. So everybody's familiar with these teleconferencing systems, right? Businesses use teleconferencing. Businesses have dedicated systems, whether it's from Polycom or Cisco. There's a bunch of different providers out there. There's been a lot of analytics around how people use these teleconferencing systems, and several large Fortune 500 companies, IBM was one of the most prominent. What they found is they had a tremendous amount of spend in deploying these systems, but very rarely were people actually using them in the proper way. And when I say proper, I mean the way they intended these teleconferencing systems to be used, these video conferencing systems to be used. What they found is when people would go into the huddle room and they would start to remotely collaborate with folks, they do it through their portable devices. They pull out their phone, they Skype on their laptops, they use FaceTime on their Apple devices. They're using the devices that they're familiar with from their personal lives. And this was something that you're seeing, this increase in the corporate professional world of portable devices being integrated into the professional environment. And it drives IT people nuts because they need to have a managed network, but they have to contend with people's personal technology. Because simply put, that's what folks are familiar with. That's what they like to collaborate with, and we need to blend it into these rooms, these environments. It's just the way that business has been evolving from a technology standpoint. So let's turn our attention now into some specific pieces of technology that are designed for these collaborative spaces. And that is where we really step in as TechLogix. So I like to look at technology, and I think you're getting a feel for this, based on problem solving. And we can look at the fact that 17 million meetings happen daily, and 20% start late because of technology issues. Again, don't know how to use the system, don't have the right connector. A lot of different reasons why technology fails us, but it does. And we as professionals can address this with some of the technology that's being developed today. And one of the chief pieces of technology out there is what's known as an automated inline controller. These devices are designed to either completely replace the touch control system, the traditional control system, I should say, in the room, or supplement the control system in the room. And this type of technology is starting to transcend across a variety of different markets because of the ease of use and usability for the ultimate end users. So what these devices do is they live in line between a digital source, like a laptop or a document camera, whatever digital source you have, HDMI output typically, and the ultimate display. So that display may be a projector, it may be a flat panel, which is more of the norm, some sort of digital display. So you take your HDMI cable from your source, you plug it into these little inline controllers, you run another HDMI cable out of the output, plug it into your display. And what these devices do is when they sense any HDMI activity, so I came in, plugged in my laptop, these sense it, and they automatically output control commands to the different devices in the room. So when I plug in my laptop, or turn on my document camera, I'm automatically sending control commands to dim the lights, turn on the display, drop a projection screen. All of these things happen automatically. So from an end user standpoint, they don't have to learn a control system. All they have to do is plug in their laptop, which they know how to do, or turn on the document camera in the room. This type of technology is in high demand by these ultimate end users because of the simplicity and because they launch a room, and when the presentation's done, they automatically turn everything off without wasting energy. Now, there's other features that we look at built into these different devices. In this particular case, the unit we're looking at here on the screen, this does things like audio de-embedding. This will take things like the HDMI audio stream and pull the audio off of it, de-embed it, so we can feed a soundbar, which you do see in a lot of these rooms. And then, of course, like I mentioned, when we turn off our laptop, when we disconnect our video source or whatever our source input might be, the room goes back to its original state. Things turn off, things go back to the way they should have been when the room was first used. That's how this technology works, and they're fully customizable. When you're installing these, you're connecting a laptop to them and putting in the different RS-232 commands or the different logic commands. So you customize these at setup to interact with virtually any device that takes an RS-232 command or a CC command or a contact closure logic command. So a lot of flexibility, but you're seeing these devices because they are designed for end user ease of use. And that's important in a huddle room. Now, another big area where these meetings can fall apart, and for any of us who do traveling a lot, we go into different conference rooms or different presentation halls, we know that connecting to a display is not always a guaranteed thing. We don't always have the right connection depending on the different devices we're trying to use. And that's where this concept of the presenter cable comes into play. And this is actually a patented technology. This is something that, you look at it and you say, this is incredibly simple. Why didn't I think of that? But it's been developed, and it's actually sold en masse to a large variety of these enterprise end users. This is one of those products that finds its way by the tens of the thousands into Microsoft and places like that. What this is a standard HDMI cable that has an aircraft aluminum keyring on it, and that keyring attaches adapters, HDMI adapters, directly onto the cable. Really simple, but really necessary, because if we think of how many different portable devices are out there, I've got an iPad with a 30-pin connector or a lightning connector on it. I've got my phone, which has a USB-C connector or a micro HDMI or a mini HDMI. My laptop, may have a display port, a mini display port connector. There's all these different connection formats for devices in these rooms and in these environments. And because more and more people are, again, collaborating with their personal devices because that's what they're comfortable with, we need to find a way to leverage that and be able to connect all those different devices in the conference room, in the huddle room, in the meeting room. And for that reason, that's why this simple product is such a mass seller. So we make a variety of different pre-built options just based on top-selling configurations that we've seen. I mean, by far, we see a lot of USB-C today. We see a lot of mini DisplayPort. We see a lot of DisplayPort conversion. And then we see a lot of Apple Lightning conversion. Those tend to be the top 4 different type connectors we see. But you're still seeing micro HDMI, mini HDMI, even DVI. There's a variety of different adapters. They're all built into these key rings that you can buy a la carte, build yourself, or buy pre-assembled on these HDMI cables. Very popular device, but very low cost. And again, that's one of the things that's really important in huddle rooms, creating a solution anybody can understand that they can deploy very, very quickly. Now, as we talk about presenter tables, we have to talk about a way to connect them to our displays, connect them to our systems. And that's another area, you know, I think you're seeing the theme here. TechLogix really focuses on affordability and simplicity, intuitive solutions under table connection points. And we'll look at some variations of this, table inserts and things like that here in a minute. But these under table connection points are a simple way to take your presentation cable, have a plug, have an access point on the edge of the desk or podium or table, and then have a cable running to our display. These are simple connection points for simple connectivity and collaboration in conference rooms. Very, very popular solution for those low-cost rooms. Now let's turn our attention to some of the all-in-one systems. So the actual systems that run the room, not just the control side of it, not just the connection side of it. And really a lot of the technology that we focus on is, again, designed around this frustration, designed to take advantage of the amount of spend in the marketplace. These are the things that we look at. So one of the most popular systems that you may have seen out there, this is one of the areas that we really focused our early on intellectual property development on here at TechLogix, is what's known as the SM series. So this series, the Share Me series, combines the traditional presentation switcher. A lot of people are familiar with presentation switchers. They're really a necessary device that's kind of grown in popularity over the last 5 or 6 years. But these are switchers that are made for a variety of different connection formats, whether VGA, HDMI, DisplayPort. HDMI by far is the most common connection point you're seeing integrated. But there's a variety of different ones. The job of the presentation switcher is to manage different inputs, different types of inputs in a lot of cases, and get them out to a single or maybe 2 different displays. Now, we connect those presentation switchers with different table inserts. And the table insert in the SM series system is really the heart of the system. This is what makes it a different way to collaborate. This is what's won us our technology awards over the years, and this is also what gets most people's attention. These table inserts connect to the presentation switcher with a simple standard AV cable, whether we're doing HDMI, DisplayPort, or VGA. Standard off-the-shelf cable. So from an installation standpoint, these systems install in minutes. And these table inserts drop into a standard 2-inch hole, which is the standard size you see in most corporate furniture. So this is kind of that standard grommet size that you're seeing in a lot of the desks and podiums and conference room tables. Now, again, you connect these table inserts to the presentation switcher with a standard video cable. For data and power, you connect them with a standard 3.5 millimeter cable, and you've got a functioning system. There's 2 buttons, and this is where you get into the end user value proposition, right? 2 buttons run your entire room. You've got an on-off button. When you push that on button, hold it for 3 seconds, not only does that turn on the SM series system, so it turns on the presentation switch, it turns on the switching equipment, but it also turns on the display. So from an end user standpoint, they just need to walk in the room, push that on button, and the entire room turns on. And if they hold that on-off button for 3 seconds, the entire room turns off. And then you've got a second button, and this is the Share Me button. And this is what really makes it important, because in the real world, you don't always have one table insert. Very often, you're going to have maybe one table insert at each end of the table, maybe one in front of each person that's sitting at the table, so multiple different table inserts scattered throughout the table. But the way this works is when I open up my laptop, I connect my laptop to the HDMI port of the table insert in front of me, and I hit that Share Me button, the system's going to show my laptop on the display. And if my colleague who's sitting across from me hits their Share Me button, it's going to switch over to show what's live on their computer. And for that reason, this system, this 2-button system that anyone can understand, runs the entire meeting room. Anyone can understand it. It's a low-cost way to solve the ultimate problem of creating collaboration in a meeting room, a huddle room, a conference room. This is where a lot of the intellectual property comes in. We're simplifying the ultimate end user experience. By doing that, we can also simplify the ultimate installation and make us very efficient at what we do. Now, the downside of the SM series is you got to put a table insert in. So you got to have a table that you can put a 2-inch hole in. If you don't have a table, it's marble or it's glass or whatever it is, that's where we've developed what's known as the SMP system. The same philosophy here, where we want an all-in-one, simple-to-use collaboration system that I can drop in a room and have it be cost-effective and have anyone be able to operate it. But I don't want to put it in a table insert. So what the SMP system does is it combines a collaboration hub that lives on the conference room table with a remote receiver that's connected by a twisted pair cable. And just like the SM series, the one we just looked at, we have buttons to control our display. That's all built into this product. We also have multiple inputs. If we're doing different types of sources, I might have an HDMI laptop, I might have a VGA laptop. I have different types of sources that I need to incorporate into the system. Now, as I mentioned, we run a twisted pair cable from this collaboration hub that lives on the table to the remote receiver. That's it. We don't even need the wire for power. The system's completely powered through that receiver that lives at the display. And as we plug in our laptops, our tablets, share the audio and the video, the content to the display, this system sends that over the twisted pair cable and then outputs it via HDMI. The other thing it does is it embeds the display control commands. So those buttons on top of the unit that can turn the display on, turn the display off, adjust volume, mute, all of those different things. Those commands go over the same twisted pair cable, out of the receiver, and are fed into the display via IR or CEC. It's all embedded. It's all built in. So this is an all-in-one, incredibly simple to deploy. We're just pulling a single twisted pair cable from point A to point B. Easy to deploy system. Again, any user can understand how this works. Now, this whole concept of collaborative technology really lends itself well for other vertical markets. And one of the big vertical markets that we see is education. And as we talk about collaboration here in meeting rooms and huddle rooms, it's really easy to take this system that we're going to look at here in a minute, the CAV system, this little white box that you see on the screen. It's really easy to take this and call it a conference room system because easily half of the sales we have are going into corporate AV, not education. But where we see the biggest crossover opportunity is really in the classroom and really in the lecture hall. And that's why I like to point out that that is where this thing's really designed for. So how does it work? We have a wall plate that is your simple controller. This simple controller wall plate provides volume control, source selection, different interactive display on off. It's all built into this. So it's a really simple experience for that ultimate user of the room. And then we have the source input plate. And the source input plate is where we connect our laptops to. And this is a wall plate, double gang wall plate. This is where we connect our laptops, our document cameras, whatever digital or analog device. And by the way, we do make these in a variety of different formats depending on what the room is looking for. And then the final piece is the receiver processor. And this, because it is designed to go into a variety of different environments, incorporates things like network compatibility, where I can look at this device not only on a network, not only control it on a network, but look at all the devices in my ecosystem from a single computer location. And when we think about a huddle room where we have deployments side by side, 20 rooms, 50 rooms, 23,000 rooms, all deployed side by side, systems that hang on a network can be important. Certainly for classrooms, that's important, because when we get into the classroom deployment, we need to be able to turn classrooms all off. We need to be able to send emergency evac, notifications to basically turn off any content, through these systems. And that kind of technology is all built into systems like this, as is amplification, as are wireless microphones, as are interactive whiteboards. That's all part of this system. So it's really an all-in-one room system that, again, our philosophy, make it simple. You run a single Cat5 from each component, and it runs your different room. So we can spend an hour talking about just systems like this and how they're deployed and what we can do with them. But again, we're really looking at more of an overview of technology today. Now, one of the other things that I wanted to point out is we spend an awful lot of time talking about video, and obviously HDMI, even though it supports audio and video, most people equate it to a video connection. But audio does play a role in collaboration. And as we've looked at a lot of these different systems today, you see that there is the ability to de-embed audio from the HDMI stream. So we can feed something like overhead speakers or a sound bar, whatever the environment calls for. And we here at TechLogix, we have invested in small audio systems that hang off of these video switching systems. And they're a little bit unique in the market, which is why I like to point them out here as we kind of wrap up the webinar that we're talking about today. And that's because not only are they small, compact, designed for the small collaborative space, but they're also remote controllable, which can be a very important thing. The fact that we can control things like EQ and volume remotely via IR, 232, and IP really does play into a lot of these different products. So we do have quite a following on the mixer amplifier side of our business, again, designed to be hung off of these video systems that we work with. Now, really the last thing that I wanted to touch on today is another area that we're seeing rapidly expand and rapidly grow. And as I started the conversation kind of introducing myself and introducing TechLogix, I mentioned that we're very heavy in fiber optic development. We work with a lot of different fiber technology. And USB over fiber is one of those areas. And why USB is so important is if we think about the collaborative space, you see a lot of USB-based or USB devices like document cameras, like streaming media cameras, even some of the different control pieces in the rooms are USB based. So USB does affect a lot of different areas that we're working with, that we're trying to integrate as we look at these different environments. USB is not the easiest thing to extend. And for those of you who are familiar with USB, you know that the specification maxes out on a cable at 16 feet. Frankly, 16 feet isn't enough for a lot of the real-world applications that we all deal with on a day-to-day basis. That's where the need for fiber optics, which can handle a lot of bandwidth, comes into play. Because whenever we have streaming video, document cameras, again, webcams, things like that, you get a lot of data. You get the need to move a lot of bandwidth. And that's what, again, fiber is nice for. High-speed USB distribution, super-speed USB distribution. These devices integrate really well into that collaborative environment. So with that, I will take any questions that you may have. Let me open up the little GoToMeeting webinar box here. And if you'd be so kind, if you do have any questions, pop those in that little chat window, and I'll give you a second to do that. I can answer that now. My contact information is on the screen if anyone does have questions or wants to get a hold of me with anything specific. Again, Cameron Smith with TechLogix. And with that, I'd like to, again, thank AVPro for inviting me today, and thank you for attending. I hope you got something out of today's webinar. I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon.